And thank you for attending the League of Women Voters September program. Give Me Shelter. Learn about the Affordable Housing Initiative.
We can't hear you, Mark.
Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I'm Barbara Sharp. I'm president of the League, and I would first like to thank Shireen Hale and Sarah Crosby for putting together this program, and of course thanking our panelists for their generous donation of their time and expertise. The League's mission is empowering voters and defending democracy, and accordingly we present timely programs and candidate forums in order to promote informed and active participation for voters. As an organization, the League is nonprofit and nonpartisan, and accordingly does not oppose or support individual candidates for public office. If you're interested in becoming a member, we have applications in the back. We'd love to have you. Now, looking ahead to next month, we'll be presenting candidate forums on San Juan, Lopez, and Orcas Islands for the November 6th general elections. Ballots, according to the Elections Office, will be mailed out on the 17th. And the San Juan Forum is October 11th, right here in the Grange, from 5:15 to 7:15. And on Orcas, September 17th, at the fire station, 5:15 to 7:15. And at Lopez, October 18th, at Grace Church, 5:45 to 7:45. Odd times to accommodate the ferry schedule. The candidates for San Juan County Sheriff, Prosecuting Attorney, and the District Court Judge will be available. In November, we're taking a different turn. Our membership meeting will be a book discussion of Strangers in Their Own Land by Arlie Hochschild. Dr. Hochschild is a noted sociologist who spent 5 years in the Lake Charles, Louisiana area and produced this very thoughtful discourse. If you have not already read it, it is available in paperback, which also has an afterword that was added just this year. This was originally published in 2016, and the author added an update to it post-election, and is also available at the library, but it's the original hardcover edition that does not have the afterword. You can order it online. The bookstore does not have it in stock, but they'd be happy to order it for you. And now I'd like to introduce Shireen Hale, who will kick our program off.
Thank you. Okay, so first what I'd like to do is just do a brief overview of what we're going to be doing this afternoon. So this program is scheduled to run from noon to 2, depending on how many questions there are. We might finish a little bit early. It follows a program we sponsored last year that focused on the reasons we have an affordable housing program and the things that are being done or might be done to alleviate the program. I'm going to do a brief synopsis of that program, and then the remainder of our time today will be used to discuss the real estate excise tax that will be on the November ballot to help fund affordable housing. So you're going to be hearing from 3 speakers this afternoon. Ryan Page, Affordable Housing Coordinator for San Juan County. Ryan will talk about funding options that were considered, the proposal that's on the November ballot, and he'll have about 20 minutes to explain that, plus an additional 10 minutes for questions. He'll be followed by Steve Olvey with Yes for Homes Coalition, and Steve Buck, owner of San Juan Island Coldwell Banker office, and they'll each discuss their view of the benefits and concerns with the proposal. We have 10 minutes allotted for each of their presentations, plus an additional 5 minutes for questions. And then after the 3 presentations, we'll open it up for just general questions for any or all of them. For those of you in the audience, I ask that you refrain from making statements and that you focus your remarks on questions for our speakers. And with that, I will, I have to give my summary. I'm not quite ready for Ryan. Okay, so last year's program. So what we learned during last year's program. We learned that there are two components to our housing problem, well, at least two components. One, there isn't enough housing available for our residents, and that the cost of that housing is too high for the wages paid on the islands. Things that contribute to our affordable housing problem include our strong second home market, where people that are not residents buy the housing that is available. The high cost of construction, part of that's because we live on an island and everything's expensive out here. The lack of construction of multifamily homes, which would be more affordable for a lot of residents. The lack of construction of low-end homes, in part because builders make more money building custom homes, so they don't build those, spec homes, that sort of thing. Another reason is land use laws that limit density and accessory dwelling units, and some of that is driven by state Growth Management Act requirements. Vacation rentals are part of the problem. They're certainly not the whole problem, but they make the problem worse. And then finally, wages that are too low. Again, wages too low for the cost of housing out here. Last year we heard about some of the challenges faced by our housing nonprofits. They include not having a reliable and adequate source of funds to use for match when they apply for state and federal housing grants. We also heard about difficulties they have competing with the large cities for state housing trust fund dollars. We heard about actions that were in the works to try and deal with the affordable housing program, or housing problem. At that time, the county set aside about $100,000 for housing workers in tourism businesses. The county was also revising their rules for vacation rentals, and again, this program took place a year ago, so that work has moved forward. And then finally, there was a county-led group developing a work plan to deal with our affordable housing problems. So what you're going to hear about today is one action that is proposed to help us provide housing that is affordable to our lower income residents. And with that, I will turn it over to Ryan to explain the details of the proposal.
Thank you, Sheree. Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Ryan Page. I'm the Affordable Housing Coordinator for San Juan County. Just want to give you guys some background information today on this proposition number 1 that you're going to see on your ballots this November. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about some of the other programs that we manage at the county to try to address affordable housing issues in our county. We have a revolving loan fund for first-time home buyers to help with down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. We have a rental assistance program for seniors and people with disabilities. We manage an emergency rental assistance program for people that are in danger of becoming homeless. We manage community development block grant applications in the county. We run the annual point-in-time homeless count in the county. And last year I was also involved with the community development department to draft a updated housing needs assessment as part of the comprehensive plan update. So Sheree touched on this a little bit, but in March of 2016, the County Council authorized the creation of a work group to try to put together a plan as a sort of roadmap to move forward to address some of the housing issues that Sheree just brought to your attention. This group included a large diversity of members. It had a county councilman, the Town of Friday Harbor administrator, the directors of the Department of Community Development and Health and Community Services from San Juan County, the executive director of the Opportunity Council, which is a Whatcom-based nonprofit, a member of both the San Juan Island and Orcas Island School Board, members of the Orcas and Lopez Community Land Trust, and as well as 5 local business owners. So over the course of about 6 to 8 months, this group met together, brainstormed, talked about the challenges and different possible solutions to try to, again, put together a plan that the county could then take forward and begin taking some actions. So this plan was developed, and then in March of 2017, what is we call the Affordable Housing Strategic Action Plan was officially adopted by the County Council. So this plan has a number of variety of actions that are assigned to a variety of different organizations, including the County Staff and Health and Community Services Department, which is the department that I'm housed in, as well as the Community Development Department. It has tasks for the Housing Advisory Committee, which is the local volunteer advisory board that advises us on housing issues, as well as some of these nonprofits. One of the tasks, the probably highest priority task of this plan, was for the advisory committee to review possible local funding sources for affordable housing to try to make a recommendation to the county council. So following the passage of this plan, the Housing Advisory Committee, which, just to clear up a little bit of confusion, was formerly known as the Housing Bank Commission. It has since been renamed to the Housing Advisory Committee. A little confusing, apologize for that. They began, following the adoption of this plan, to research the possible local funding measures. And really what they found was there are 3 possible funding measures for affordable housing that was within the county's ability to enact. One is a 0.1% sales tax, one is a property tax levy, and one is the real estate excise tax of 0.5%. So after doing some research, debating, having discussions with other people, other experts in the field, they ultimately decided to move forward and make a recommendation of the 0.5% real estate excise tax. However, before they were going to make this recommendation to the council for them to consider, they wanted to make sure that they were coming with their recommendation a robust plan for the administration of these funds. And so they requested that the county staff and the Health and Community Services Department develop a detailed plan for what this proposed funding source would look like, how the funds would be used, who would be responsible for what, and just how much money would they expect to be receiving. And so those are some of the same questions that I want to be able to answer for you guys today. So the first question is, why was that funding source chosen by the advisory committee? The reason, there's a couple of reasons. One of the reasons is that it serves the largest population of people that might be looking for housing. So for instance, a 0.1% sales tax, there's limitations on that use of funds to where people have to be making below 60% of the area median income. The area median income is a commonly used statistic in the housing field. It's set by HUD every year, and basically 100% of the area median income adjusted for family size is statistically supposed to put half of the county in one half and half of the county above that 100% line. So the real estate excise tax of 0.5% is able to serve a population up to 115% of the area median income as opposed to 60%. So that was very attractive to the advisory committee, as they saw as the possibility to serve as wide a population of people as possible. Another consideration was the advisory committee was very sensitive in not wanting to add another property tax to people's ever-growing property tax bills. There have been many worthy causes over the past couple of years that have been property tax driven, and so the advisory committee felt that they did not want to pursue that avenue. Another benefit that they saw of this funding source was that it's a one-time fee, it's not retroactive, and it's not ongoing. So the next question was, well, okay, what can these funds be used for? The proceeds of the tax can be used for the development of affordable housing and just about everything that entails, including acquisition, building, rehabilitation, maintenance, and operation. Although, even though operation is included, the county has made it clear through their plan that the county does not intend to own or operate any housing. That is a long-standing county policy that we have also put into this plan. So basically what that means is it would fund the development and the preservation of affordable rental and ownership housing in San Juan County. And this will be done through a competitive grant and loan process following the county's comprehensive plan. In addition to that, there is a limit of 10% of the funds that would be able to be used for administrative costs to administer this program. The county's goal is to come in below that 10% number, but there is, in fact, cap on it. The next question is, who would be able to make use of these funds? Again, we just talked a little bit about this idea of area median income and the populations that they can serve. The funds would be able to use for very low, and moderate income persons and those with special needs. So that falls into those seniors and disabled people's population. So to give you a general idea of what that means, is that would be over 50% of the county's population would be eligible to participate in projects that are funded by these dollars. And in addition to that, to give you kind of an idea of what those income thresholds would look like, for a family of 3 that are at 115%, you would be looking at about $70,000. So that would be the income limit for someone in a family of 3. The income goes up the larger your family is, and it goes down the smaller your family is. And we are estimating that a little over 400 households would either have new ownership or rental housing developed or have their housing preserved during the first 12 years of this program. Now that's also a conservative estimate because the way this program is set up is that it puts a very high priority on housing that is going to be what's called long-term or permanently affordable. So that means it's going to have affordability restrictions for 99 years. And so that 400 household number is over the first 12 years. However, if we are building and preserving housing that could be affordable for 99 years, then there's going to be a lot more families that are going to matriculate and turn over in those housing over those 99 years. Who pays for this tax? The way this is set up is that both the buyer and the seller have to pay some proportion of the tax. In this case, the buyer is responsible for 99%, and the seller would pay the remaining 1%. When would it go into effect, and how much money are we expecting it to generate? The real estate excise tax would come into effect 30 days after the election is certified by the auditor, so that means most likely around late December. What we are anticipating, what we are scheduling or have scheduled out if it was approved by voters, is that there would have to be a fund balance buildup, and so what you would likely see is the first notice to developers that there are funds available in the summer of 2019, with the goal of awarding any funds by the end of 2019 or early 2020 to have projects get started. We would project that if it was approved by voters, the home fund, over the course of 12 years, which is the sunset for this fund, it could be re-elected in 12 years, but it is only a set amount of time at this time for 12 years. We're expecting it to generate a little over $15 million. In addition, Sheree mentioned a little bit about how some of the local nonprofits were interested in a local funding measure to increase their opportunity to get match. What does match mean? That is when you are able to bring in state, federal, or private donation dollars that you might not have had otherwise. And so what we've heard from state and federal funders is they find projects much more attractive when there is a local funding source that is providing the sort of ground level funding for a project. And so we have seen in cities such as Bellingham that we would expect these funds would attract an additional 3 to 4 times the amount of the initial funds from other state, federal, and private donation funding sources. So that would be a total of a little over $62 million total influx of dollars that we are projecting could be brought into the county. And then the most important question is, how would these funds be managed? They would be managed through the Health and Community Services Department. All the funds would be deposited into an affordable housing fund, and then again, the process is going to be a competitive grant and loan process where we are going to put requests for proposals or notification of funds available out to the community of developers and nonprofits that exist in the community to say, these are the amount of funds available, these are the kind of projects that we would like to see, send us your proposal, send us your project, and then those are going to be weighted, graded, and scored against each other to make sure that we are funding the most competitive and the best projects. And so that process for selecting a project is going to be that the county staff will receive the responses to, say, a request for proposal. The county staff and Health Community Services Department will grade those responses, will provide a recommendation to the Citizens Advisory Committee, the Housing Advisory Committee, and then the Housing Advisory Committee will, again, review the responses that have been received, make a recommendation to the county council, and ultimately it's the county council's authority to decide whether or not to approve those projects. So that's the sort of system that we have set up. There is, I'm sure, many more questions and many more details that go into it. We have about a 20-page administrative plan that is online on our affordable housing page for the proposed funding source. And so if you want to get into the real nitty-gritty of some of those things, then it's there for you to read, or you can just ask me a question right now and I'll find the answer for you faster.
Okay. Questions for Ryan?
Because the state legislation says that you have to have a maximum, we have to have a full 1% land bank tax in order to have the affordable housing tax. What happens in 2026 if the land bank isn't renewed?
So that's a good question. We have gotten clarification from this. We've asked the same question to our Deputy Prosecuting Attorney, John Kane, and he has confirmed to us that these two measures would be inextricably linked. And so if the land bank tax was not renewed, the home fund tax would also go away.
So it would only be an 8-year.
That's right. The program itself would not go away, and so much as the funds that had already been collected could still be used, the project monitoring and reporting that would be required would still continue, but that is something that is unavoidable to us as part of the law that enables this fund.
Question back here.
Has there been any discussion as to whether there should be an eligibility requirement for beneficiaries in terms of previous residents in the county? I know one of the issues is attracting more people to the county to take jobs and having affordable housing available, but then there are people who say, if you've been here a long time, maybe you should have a bit more rights.
That is definitely sort of an ongoing discussion, not just among this proposed program, but also affordable housing in general. The thought on that is to sort of leave it up to the people that are providing the housing, so in this case, nonprofits or developers. Part of responses that we're expecting to receive for, say, competitive grant is for, say, a nonprofit to tell us who they're imagining is their tenant profile, who they're imagining are going to be living in this property. And so that's a consideration to have. And we do want to balance the needs of providing housing for islanders, while also keeping in mind that there are people such as on Orcas where they have new teachers coming in that are going to be long-term employees at the school, and they can't take those jobs because they can't find housing. And so hopefully we'll be able to manage the needs of both of those communities, but it's not something that's specifically baked into the plan. It's something that we are expecting to get from the proposals that we receive.
Question back here in the back. Oh, there's two of you. Okay.
Will the program be for rental housing as well as owned housing?
Yes, we're mentioning a mix of both.
Steve?
When the land bank comes up for renewal, could it be considered as less than 1%?
Not if it was going to maintain for the home fund, because the RCW stipulates that it has to have been adopted at the maximum percent for this to still be valid.
A number of communities in Washington, as well as other locations, rely on bonding to fund this sort of thing, private money. Have you folks considered that?
We thought about it a little bit. One thing that the auditor has made clear to us is that she is not expecting us to be spending any of these funds before we collect them. And so we won't be able to spend future, say, bonded funds. And so it's something that has not had a lot of discussion, but it is something that we would consider, I think.
How do you ensure 99 years of affordability or whatever?
So there's a couple different ways that we can do that. There's ways that already go on in the county. One way is just to have a deed restriction, and which that means is it's a legal document that you can put on a piece of land that says you could do X, Y, and Z. You will serve X, Y, and Z population. The real way that we'll be able to maintain those restrictions is through vigorous project monitoring. So the plan sets up for a minimum yearly site visits to every project that's been funded through this plan. And that's going to mean that the county is going to not be operating the housing, but we are going to be keeping tabs on all of these projects that we have funded to ensure that they are maintaining those affordability requirements. And if they're not, then we're going to be proposing corrective actions to make sure that they are enforced. But the legal mechanism, there's a couple different ways, but the main one is usually a deed restriction.
Other questions?
Maybe explain how it's kept affordable currently, that like if somebody goes to sell one, what the level they're allowed to.
Sure. So, I mean, again, there's a couple of different ways. There's a community land trust model in which the land trust itself actually owns the land, and then they have a requirement essentially that they get a say in who you're going to resell it to, and in that way, that is how they maintain their affordability restrictions. There's other ways in which you could say this a simple restriction that would just say you must resell this to someone who is at, 115% of the area median income, and you have to have their income approved by the county. And so there will be a person set up at the county. We already do this for, say, Homes for Islanders homes. They have deed restrictions on them, and they have to send income information to the county for us to verify that this person's allowed to purchase that lot.
Other questions? Okay.
Is there a percentage of funds that are going to be put aside for rentals?
So that's a good question. The way this plan was set up was to sort of provide maximum flexibility and the responsiveness to the county council. Since it's a 12-year program, things change, and the priorities of the county or the needs of the counties may be different in 5, 6, or 7 years. And so it doesn't stipulate X amount of rentals or even X amount of dollars to each island to allow things to be opportunistic. So if there is, say, an apartment complex that comes for sale on an individual island, we don't have to say, well, we built a rental complex last year, we can't take advantage of this opportunity. And so it doesn't specifically break those out as like a budget.
One other question. For people that own affordable homes, can they rent those homes out on a long-term basis?
It depends on the situation. Typically, a lot of affordable housing have restrictions that it has to be your primary residence. The reason for that is because, people in this county can make a lot of money sometimes renting out their house.
Well, I'm talking about, long-term.
I think it's something that is very doable. There are different situations we deal with this with our first-time home buyers revolving loan fund where we have loans with people. They say there's a stipulation that it must be their primary residence, but they say, hey, I want to go backpack through Southeast Asia for 6 months. We're not in the business of telling people how to live their lives, but there does need to be some monitoring of that and ensuring if somebody has decided that they want to move off island, that's fine, but then they need to sell that house because that means that they have sort of circumvented the system for ensuring that it's affordable because they could be renting it to whoever.
All right, any other questions for Ryan? Okay, let's move on to Steve Olby, and he's going to talk about his view of the benefits and concerns with the proposal. So 10 minutes and then 5 minutes for questions.
All right, thank you. Can you hear all right? I'd rather not use this. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. This guy's very impressive. Thanks for coming today. For me, the League of Women Voters, these forums is synonymous with community well-being and just a great opportunity. I'm real happy to be here to represent the Yes for Homes Coalition of San Juan County. We are grassroots, volunteer, nonpartisan, and multi-island affordable housing advocates, laser focused on passing this Home Fund initiative on November 6th. This proposed Home Fund is a carefully constructed government intervention, as you have just heard. After years of broad public outcry that continued inertia is unacceptable. This is an affirmative push toward achieving the greatest good for the greatest number of people who live here. We like to say that this 0.5% real estate excise tax harnesses the problem in order to fund the solution. Call it our ace in the hole, this REIT, this excise tax for housing. It's a custom tool in our toolbox that other counties can only envy. Communities beyond counting are flailing with this very same problem. But over 790 communities nationwide are today employing similar housing trust funds models using local revenue sources to overcome these community crippling housing trends. However, there's an interesting delusion at play here, at least from my perspective, and that is that we all have a fair chance to live a version of the dream on these islands. That notion of the island dream contrasts sharply with the reality that we know through hundreds of housing-related conversations with young adults, longtime islanders, and business owners, and decades of powerful letters to the editor. Our island communities are not equitable, nor particularly stable, nor economically efficient, especially if you happen to be one of the hundreds of lower income people or seniors or folks with special needs trying to settle into life here. literally standing at the bottom of a narrow stairway, looking up at the island version of the American dream, the social construct of a bright outcome promised by building skills, steady hard work, living within your means, and building equity. All the while, these workers crowded at the bottom of the steps provide essential services to all of us standing above. Our chronic lack of affordable housing stock is literally like having several consecutive lower stair treads rotted out or missing entirely. Thankfully, there has been some nonprofit housing success, Ryan alluded to this, demonstrated by about 40 permanently affordable homes created by the Community Home Trust and over 100, mostly market value homes built with admirable sweat equity and USDA funds by the Homes for Islanders. But these efforts have only marginally slowed our functional housing slide. How many times have you heard lately Islanders have either 3 homes or 3 jobs? And in the summer, the woes of the stressed domino effect of the island housing shuffle, people get bumped around. Well, then just what are some of the community benefits that we might expect from the home fund? It should be possible for working people to afford a home and still have money left over for basics like food, transportation, and childcare. We believe that the many individual successes and varied community-scale benefits over time will nurture stable families that work hard to advance in life and gain home equity, who enroll their kids in our good schools, spend locally, start small businesses, and yes, join us in paying property taxes. Children deserve a chance to succeed in school and in life, which all begins with their families being able to afford a decent place to live. Studies and common sense show that kids that are raised in stable homes are better able to learn in the classroom and are more likely to succeed as adults. More young families in more affordable housing with hundreds of kids enrolling in our schools means many more federal and state educational dollars, as well as an expanding need for more teachers, custodians, and administrators. And the energy of boisterous youth on the pitch, or the courts, or the mats, in plays and musicals, on the sidewalks, and yes, talking too much in our library. Everyone should have the opportunity to live in a safe, healthy, affordable house. Fully half of our residents today, as Ryan mentioned, could be eligible to seek a home within a wider range of realistic rents and mortgages over time with this affordable housing build-out. This particular tax initiative raises the ceiling for housing subsidies for moderate income families to 115% of the area income. And unlike any other form of taxation, does not harm seniors and those with special needs living on fixed incomes, nor the vast majority of the rest of us who rarely buy or sell real estate. It is better for society, the environment, the economy, and families if people can afford to live on the island where they work. Talk about a job stimulus package playing out over 12 years or more, dampening the unpredictable little economic downturns that we experience, the annual dependence on volatile sales tax revenue, and winter cash flow doldrums. Imagine the skilled tradespeople and laborers necessary for as many as 400 affordable countywide households by 2030. Certainly small businesses, perhaps even tech startups, will be able to recruit and hire from a much larger pool of local talent, keeping wages competitive and circulating in our own communities. This can lessen the chronic labor shortfall in business, services, and construction trades, especially in the summer. Have you tried to get an electrician, or a drywaller, or a landscaper, or especially a plumber on short notice for a problem at home anytime recently? It's ludicrous. Sadly, once abundant natural resources like timber and fish are all but gone as island-based economic sectors. But local small agriculture and ranching can increase markedly if inflated land prices and especially the severe lack of affordable housing for young farmers and interns can be overcome. We all benefit from remarkable levels of volunteerism here. Yes, retirees tend to have the time to reinvest in our collective well-being, but so do energetic working people who can count on the stability of a reasonable housing cost. Think of your neighbors, volunteer firefighters, EMTs, trail builders, spill responders, caregivers, and the like, who perform these important duties best as younger, more physically fit members of our communities. Then there are the unmeasurable benefits of multi-generational families living here. Our kids and their kids in turn will have a realistic opportunity to stay here or return here to settle in and be close and give back to us all. Family always has been the essential glue of small communities like ours. And we all hope to live out our last days in the community where our families and friends can be close. Our aging demographic calls for proportional levels of skilled home care, but those remarkable people do not make enough in wages to be able to afford rent, let alone a home here. This sad situation is exacerbated by the recent closure of our Allard Care Center. We can redirect the recent and unusual trend of several businesses here using their own land and funds to provide critical worker housing rather than using those funds to diversify, pay higher wages, and grow their business. Creation of homes restricted to long-term affordability for targeted income brackets means property management responsibilities. And Ryan touched on this several times. Just like with our existing nonprofit land trust providing homes today. So for every few units, or buildings, or trailers, or enclaves, or small houses, there will be more jobs in managing, repairing, cleaning, and doing landscaping for these affordable rentals and homes over the years. And you know, we all need the people who need affordable housing. Every one of us in this room. By subsidizing and stimulating the private sector to create hundreds of affordable homes and apartment units, we will enjoy a more diverse, vibrant, and interesting place to live. We know that some pass-it-forward kind of magic happens when everyone who contributes to a community feels the caring embrace and respect from their neighbors. We can and must learn from the past. We can redirect the arc of the county's recent history, not shying from inevitable growth, but insisting on wise growth with a focus on a stronger middle class. This creation of diverse housing will support greater economic diversity, family stability, balanced age demographics, and community resilience well beyond what we currently enjoy. And as in so many convoluted modern issues, our future will not be determined by chance, but will be determined by choice, as we are reminded by scientist David Suzuki. This home fund proposition is the essence of community self-determination. Exactly the right thing at the right time for all the right reasons. Please join us and vote yes for the home fund on November 6th. Thank you.
Perfect timing. All right, questions for Steve?
So I have three things to say. One is, Steve, that was marvelous. What a beautiful talk, and how meaningful. And secondly, when you mentioned the statistics about the number of homes that have been created by the nonprofits, you focused on the San Juan Community Home Trust, and I just want to make sure people understand that a tremendous amount of work has happened on Orcas, particularly, and also on Lopez in this regard. And my last question is, some years ago, we had a REIT on the ballot, and it failed. And I wonder why you think that it failed and why this one will pass.
Thank you for that, and thank you for those clarifications too. I'm focused on San Juan, but yes, we're part of a team of the entire county here, and it's a wonderful group. From what I understand, I arrived here in 2006 to start building my own home, and from what I understand, At that time, there was a little bit too much confidence that the metrics, the numbers that were in front of us about how serious this problem was becoming were good enough to kind of sell the idea to the voters. And perhaps not enough legwork was done, and there were some assumptions that maybe this is kind of a no-brainer. Well, that's at least how we understand it looking back now, and I can tell you that we're not taking that approach this time around at all. And so we're trying to focus more on personal stories, on real people, real faces, real stories. And we also know that since 2006, this problem has become much worse. So we kind of feel like that we've worked hard to try to educate voters as to what the county's trying to do and what this campaign's about. But we have also tried to put that personal face on it, because I think every single one of us in this room, without doubt, knows a number of people in various age groups who have had, are having, or will have difficulties with affordable housing.
Other questions? All right, let's move on to Steve Buck, and he's going to talk about his concerns and thoughts on the proposal.
So, hi everybody. First of all, I want you to know I'm not here to speak against the affordable housing tax. I wasn't asked to do that. I was asked to provide my perspective. And excuse me for reading, but it's the only way I can tell you everything. So, to me, I think the biggest challenge for our community in the San Juan Islands now and in the future is figuring out how we can maintain a balance in housing in order to continue having the wonderful diversity and character our community has. I do believe it still can be done, but we have to have a detailed, well laid out plan for it. If we don't, it won't be dealt with until it becomes more apparent that it's a problem, and then it will probably be too late. There isn't just one solution to this problem. There has to be a variety of things that we do to achieve a housing balance. Think of potential housing solutions in a pie chart. Right now, the Community Home Trust and Homes for Islanders each have large pieces of the affordable housing part of that pie. They are both very good organizations that have certainly helped provide different types of housing that have substantially helped maintain a housing balance here, and they have done so for many years now. If it wasn't for them, things would already be very different. Many of the people in those homes
Oh, sorry.
You want to just, whatever you're doing with that?
Oh, I'm passing it back.
Many of the people in those homes would not be able to afford to live here otherwise. Therefore, without them, we would probably be having to import people from the mainland to work here. Things would be more expensive because you'd have to pay them more money to come here. Our schools would have fewer students. There would be fewer people participating in all the different things there are to do in this community, and so on. The tapestry of our community has been substantially enhanced due to these housing programs. People do have to qualify for both the Community Home Trust and Homes for Islanders programs, though, as they are both government subsidized. They are very different from each other regarding their ownership structure. The Community Home Trust develops perpetually affordable housing. Homes for Islanders is primarily a sweat equity program, helping people to acquire their homes with essentially federal home loans and much of their own work. There are some perpetual programs, but most of what Homes for Islanders does is in this format. When someone sells a Community Home Trust home, their profit is restricted so that those homes continue to be perpetually affordable. When someone sells a Homes for Islanders home, they are allowed to basically get all the profit they can at whatever market rate they can get for those homes. They repay the federal home loan part of it in the process, and that helps this program continue on the federal level. They can then take their money and go buy something else if they want to, trade up. This program has been very popular because it not only helps people acquire their own homes, it helps them get into the real estate market and hopefully get ahead a little bit financially in life. There is a large segment of our population in the housing pie chart that is comprised of people that either don't qualify for those affordable home programs and or they want to acquire housing through unrestricted and traditional methods using conventional financing via banks, etc. We see a lot of this in the real estate business. In fact, they represent the vast majority of the transactions we're involved in. What we often find, especially for those at the start or first-time level, is that the biggest challenge they face is coming up with a down payment, closing cost, and 1% land bank tax. They often have good enough credit and income, but they don't have the cash needed. An additional 0.5% tax on, say, a $450,000 home would equate to about $2,250 more that buyers would have to come up with in order to be able to purchase that home. Some might ask, would that make a difference? And the answer is yes, it could make the difference between people being able to buy a home via conventional financing methods or not. They may not qualify, bottom line. There has been a lot of work that has gone into creating an affordable housing strategic action plan for San Juan County, which is Resolution 13, and the proposal for a 0.5 of 1% real estate excise tax buyers would have to pay. I have read both of these. I understand we have had a housing task force, but I have not read in the information provided to me anything about how extensive of the search there was done to look for potential affordable housing options for us to consider. Whether or not this affordable housing tax is approved, I think there should be an extensive search of other potential options and then a list of potential options for us to consider as a community based on what other communities with similar affordable housing challenges have done or are in the process of doing, or any other original ideas that people may come up with. Then I think we need to choose the best options, plan them out, and implement the plan as soon as possible. The sooner we do, the better it'll be for everybody here. Right now, we have before us essentially just one option. It has its pluses and minuses. It currently would help those who qualify for the Community Home Trust on San Juan Island, as well as similar projects on the other islands, which is Lopez and Orcas, by helping us to provide housing for those who couldn't afford to live here otherwise. However, it would also make it more difficult for some people buying homes via the typical purchasing and financing process, and those people are already struggling to come up with the down payment, closing cost, land bank tax needed to purchase a home. Some have suggested to put the additional 0.5% tax on the seller's side then. Well, they already pay a 1.78% tax, so if you're the seller, do you really want to pay another 0.5%? Do you think that's fair? Or if that happened, would it just lead to the cost being passed on to the buyers, therefore increase prices, which again makes it less affordable, particularly for first-time home buyers, and therefore takes away from our housing balance and community. I've talked with the Homes for Islanders. This tax does not help them because their model is primarily not perpetually affordable. Homes for Islanders told me they don't need funding. They have a funding mechanism that works. What they need is land, and they're running out of it. They don't know where they're going to go next. I've talked with other realtors. One who spent a good amount of time studying this proposed tax says, this puts some buyers in the position of partially funding their own affordable housing where the burden on them is the greatest. Again, coming up with down payment, loan costs, closing costs, and 1% land bank tax. They said it might be more achievable from a transaction standpoint if the tax were on the seller side. However, since that would be an increased cost to the seller, it will likely lead to increased pricing. I then asked this realtor if this tax had been in place, if any of their clients would not have been able to purchase their homes. They said they have had transactions where if this tax had been in place, their clients probably would not have qualified for their loan. They also said they don't agree with the program that further burdens people that are already in need of assistance. Then I talked to a contractor friend of mine. He is adamantly opposed to the tax and gave me a brief summary of costs that already make it so expensive to buy or build. He gave me an example of a mid-level home on a regular lot. Cost of land, $100,000. Plan review, $450. Engineering, $1,800. Building permit, $7,000. Connection to Opalco, $5,000. Water availability, $160. Test water, $75. Septic design, $2,500. Septic permit, $450. Septic system, $28,000 to $40,000. Well, $15,000 to $30,000. Site survey, $1,800 to $2,100. Storm water plan, thousands depending on the situation. Stormwater review, $125. If you're in the town, a connection for water, sewer, and stormwater is now over $34,000. Then there's house design, $15,000 plus, driveway, $10,000 plus. So you're looking at close to $200,000 before you even begin starting to build. Then, of course, the cost of construction now is around $300 a square foot and up. Then there's landscaping. He went on to say, if you're renting, cost for rental, if you can find one, $1,100 if you're lucky. Town, water, sewer, stormwater, and garbage, $250 to $300 a month. Opalco, $200 a month. Phone and internet, $150. Cable satellite, $100. $1,850 before you can start buying food, insurance, medical expenses, things for your kids, etc. Then he said, if someone built an apartment building, they are doing this, it's all a numbers deal. And if it costs more to build an apartment, they're going to inject that cost into it, and then the cost of rentals is going to go up. In the San Juan County 2018 Real Estate Excise Tax Administrative and Financial Plan that Ryan pointed out, it says it's not a property tax, but rather an additional 0.5% excise tax on the purchase and sale of real estate. Well, why not a property tax, since a balanced community is a benefit to us all? Two programs would be funded from the tax, the production and preservation of homes, and two, the acquisition and of Opportunity Bridge Loans Program, which from what I'm reading is basically a funding program for affordable home projects. Correct. The county intends to manage this program, as Ryan said, using existing county employees and hiring one person to help run it. Yearly administrative costs shall not exceed 10% of revenue, and that's good. That's a good program. Ryan would be the initial housing program coordinator, and I think that's good too. At this point, the only organization on San Juan Island that would qualify to receive funds is the Community Home Trust, as they are the only ones that have a perpetually affordable home ownership structure and meet the requirements of having demonstrated ability, stability, and resources to implement products and steward affordability. The county is hoping other organizations might want to apply should the tax be approved and the money is there. Should this tax be approved, I think additional requirements should include that the projects be fully completed before allowing people to move in, and landscaping and maintenance should also be a part of the project so that they look completed and done nicely, and will be so perpetually as well.
Could someone turn off their phone?
Sorry, big pardon. Sorry, big pardon.
No problem. In resolution number 13, strategy 1B refers to developing a buildable land analysis. I'm wondering if that land analysis was ever done. This is probably one of the most important things we can do. I know about the land to the east of Friday Harbor where the Community Home Trust can build. But if other organizations do have interest, should the tax be approved, what areas would be available to them? Strategy 2B says, and this is as another way to potentially get affordable long-term rentals, consider incentives for construction of accessory dwelling units, guest houses, for year-round rentals. What has happened with that? I think that could also do much to not only help people find places to live here, but also help people afford to continue living here through the income they would receive from their rental. I think we should get rid of the rule that guest houses have to be on properties of 5 acres or more. Get rid of the rule that guest houses have to be within 100 feet of the main house. Get rid of the rules where the houses must share in the same well and septic system. Get rid of the rule where houses can't be more than 1,000 square feet so they can be rented out to families. These are all obstacles that keep people from building guest houses. In the prioritization of action section, it states priority would be based upon the difficulty to implement versus the potential number of units. I'd like to know more about that. Is that the best long-term strategy? Wouldn't it be better in the long run to have more units? Should they each be given reasonable weight? The housing plan states that the county would not construct any housing, but it could provide county-owned land in a public-private partnership. Is there land in mind the county already owns? Would the county then go looking for potential land? Could the county buy land and rezone for affordable housing? Could this program be used to do a private-public partnership to build a new nursing home, which we vastly need? What are the tax incentives for developers to create affordable housing? Can we create more or better incentives? Does that apply to investors as well? I'm almost done. Again, what other communities have been looked at that have or are working on similar affordable housing challenges? I'd like to know why there weren't any realtors on the Housing Task Force Committee. We are in the front lines too, trying to help people buy homes. we directly see what they have to go through, and it's tough at the starter level. Are there any affordable housing buildings from elsewhere that have been asked to advise? I'm left wishing I had the answers to these questions. What it comes down to is it worth making it even more difficult for people who are already struggling to buy a home through normal processes to help those to get homes through the Community Home Trust on San Juan and the other programs on Orcas and Lopez? I'm still undecided at this point. I'm all for the Community Home Trust. My brother Sam was on their board for many years, and I know it's vitally important that we do what we can to maintain a balance in housing. I just don't know what other options there are out there for us to consider, and if an affordable housing tax is one of our best options. Is it the right decision to put that burden upon buyers? That's it.
Thank you, Steve. Questions for Steve?
Steve asked a lot of questions, and I don't know, it seems like Ryan might have some of the answers. I wanted to ask Ryan. Can I ask Ryan a question?
Let's focus on questions for Steve first, and then we'll open it up for questions for all three of them.
I
So
understand.
just hold on.
I understand at a very basic level. I'm wondering if there is a way that maybe a first-time home buyer, and I don't know what entry level they enter at, is that a $450,000 house, is that a six? If they might be excluded, would that be something that you would look at?
I know this was something that the county looked at, and it's not a possibility. Yeah, is that correct? Yeah.
From trying to reduce the issue of the closing costs, putting something out of reach, as you and I know, these costs can be negotiated. Just because the counter, the law says that 99% has to be paid by the seller doesn't mean that that's actually how it's paid.
It's by the buyer.
Sorry, by the buyer. That's not necessarily how it's paid. The seller can agree to pay some or all of that. If that's an option, do you still believe that this tax is going to put these some of these transactions out of the reach of?
It depends on where you're at in the market. When the market's going down, you can negotiate more like that, but when the market's going up or even balanced, then it likely will lead to the seller saying, okay, I'll pay that, but I'm going to increase the price. So it leads to an increase in price.
And that the effect's the same in terms on the first-time buyer?
Yes, I think so. It really comes down to qualifying. And we also talked about, Steve had, because we had this conversation last week, or no, Ryan and I had this conversation, that's what it was. And so he looked into whether or not that additional tax could be brought into the mortgage, and there's a question about that. It's according to Sherm up at Islanders, there's a possibility of doing that, but it's not clear to me that that can be done, and the reality of it, from all the transactions that we do, usually the 1% land bank tax is not folded in, so.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, your ideas about relaxing the regulations on accessory dwelling units, are they written down somewhere, and is the county looking at those ideas?
Well, I know the county's looking, because I read it in their material, the county's actually looking at some of those things, and I had a few more. And it was in this strategic action plan, but I just didn't see anything that had happened with that. If they're working on that or considering that, and that'd be a good question for you and I.
Ryan, do you know?
Sure. So that's a very common question that we get. It's pretty multifaceted. The answer is that we are considering if there's certain incentives that we could provide to make sure that if people are building guest houses, that they would build them for long-term rentals rather than short-term. The county, some of you may remember, maybe it was a decade ago, tried to relax some of our land use designations around guest houses, and were sued and lost because the county plans under the Growth Management Act. And so some of these ideas have certainly been proposed before about trying to separate them, let them be bigger. And essentially what people's argument is that if you let every person in the county build a guest house under these rules, you just double the density of the county. And due to the law around the Growth Management Act, there are certain restrictions that the county, regardless of what it would like to do, there's no getting around it. And so it's a very complex issue. It's certainly something that the planning department and our department is considering and trying to find ways to do incentives, but simply having the county just change the code and say, you can build a 2,000-foot guest house wherever you want on your property, it's not as simple as that.
Okay, there's another question back here.
I had a question, but I'm not sure who should answer it. But it's related to first-time buyers or the lower rate, the lower purchase rate buyer. Can some of this tax be used to qualify people to get a subsidy in closing costs? I know you can't eliminate the additional tax from them. That's been determined illegal, but can that tax be used to help subsidize their closing costs?
Wouldn't be eligible for that because it's very specific about what you can use these funds for, and that's either acquisition or construction of homes, and so that wouldn't really, financing is not an allowable use of the funds.
Is the tax, the proposed tax, that's the box that's put in now? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So if it was a different tax proposed, that could address, at a different time, that could address that issue that seems to be...
If it was a different funding mechanism, this one is specifically prescribed by a specific state law, and that law sets out what we can and can't do in a lot of ways. What it doesn't say also tells us what we can't do, and so if it was a different funding mechanism, that might be possible, but for this specific one, it's very specific, and that wouldn't fall under that umbrella.
Okay, so let's open it up to questions for all three of our speakers. Any other questions? I know you had one.
I have a question for Ryan. I'd like you to address the assertion that Steve Buck made that the San Juan Community Home Trust is the only organization that would benefit in San Juan Island from these funds.
Well, I think Steve talked about it a little bit in that we are hoping that the availability of these funds, if it were passed by voters, would attract a more diverse set of affordable housing developers, including possibly the creation of new nonprofits, possibly I've had phone calls with affordable housing developers, or with developers who are interested in doing affordable housing on San Juan Island, if the numbers make sense, and they've discussed this with me as something that they could foresee in the future being something that they would apply for. And so I don't think that he's wrong in the sense that they are, the Home Trust is the only organization currently doing long-term 99-year affordability restrictions. But I think that in the future, we are hoping, even outside of this proposal, to be developing more affordable housing providers. That's part of our strategy going forward.
Yes, and isn't another project currently underway that could benefit potentially, or could have, if these funds had been available, the Opportunity Council purchasing Harbor View Apartments?
That's correct. So the Opportunity Council is a nonprofit based out of Bellingham. They do a lot of housing construction. They have a pretty wide reach. Anyone who's interested in the programs they run, I highly suggest you go to their website. They're a pretty awesome organization. And San Juan County is one of their counties under their umbrella, along with Skagit and Whatcom. And so they recently purchased the Harborview apartment complex here in Friday Harbor, which was an affordable housing apartment complex that had affordability restrictions that were set to sunset and was going to become market rate. The nonprofit, the Opportunity Council, came in, decided to purchase these units, and that's the kind of nonprofit that we could see coming in if there was additional funds available.
So just to clarify on that, when I was asked to do this, I did a lot more research, and Ryan gave me a bunch of information. I read through the information, and then we had like an hour-and-a-half long conversation on the phone. And I asked him different questions, and that was one of the questions that I asked him. I said, what other programs here, organizations could take advantage of this tax currently? And the answer was, because it's not just the perpetual affordability, it's also the other requirements that it's, an organization that has shown it's been able to do this for over time and that sort of stuff that I talked about. So it would Community Home Trust is the only organization, according to that conversation that we had, a local organization that could take advantage of these tax funds. However, they're hoping that does it exist, other organizations might either form or come in.
Do I remember correctly, Ryan, that in your initial presentation, you said something about the county operating a first-time buyer down payment assistance program?
Yes, we do.
So how does that work, and is that something that would alleviate some of the concerns that somebody over here had?
It would certainly, so there's a limited amount of funds available. It's a revolving loan fund. And so what that means is the county provides loans to first-time home buyers that they do not have to pay on until they either sell their house or their mortgage is maturing, so 30 years. And then when one of those two things happen, the person in the program pays back the loan, and then they also pay back what's called an equity share. And so in that way, they pay back some of the equity if they sell their house. They pay some of that to the program, and that way we are able to maintain our fund balance and grow the fund to be able to provide more down payment assistance to more people in the county. And so the income requirements of that program are fairly similar to the income requirements that would be for the theoretical home fund. And so it's certainly something that we are hoping to expand in the future, and are hoping that people that, you know, there's definitely some cross-pollination that could happen if that was approved by voters. Those are definitely similar populations, and that could help a little bit alleviate some of those funds. But again, the equity loan program, we're almost at 100% utilization of that fund balance, and so we definitely wouldn't be for the number of homes that would possibly be constructed, we'd have to expand that fund a lot to be able to provide, say, assistance to everyone.
There's a question back here.
This might be rather naive, but I'm hearing that there are restrictions on the population for the island, and I'm hearing that one of the home entities would like to expand, but they can't afford the land. So if this passes, let's say you have a bunch of these builders come in and say, hey, I want to do an apartment building for X, and I'll do 4 of them for you. How are you going to monitor this growth over this window of time in, you know, whether it be individual homes or multifamily homes? How do you anticipate this model to look in terms of the number of people that can be accommodated, still within these other restrictions that I hear you referring to?
As far as how would the county manage that capacity? How would
because you say you have these other restrictions. Where's the land going to come from? Who owns the land? What are they going to sell it for? You're saying that there's a growth restriction on the island. I forget what the terminology is of that.
I'm not sure about the growth restriction.
I don't, it was a phrase you used.
Oh, the Growth Management Act.
Yeah, the
Sure.
growth
That's
management. See, I don't know how all those
Sure.
affect as this is implemented. I was just curious how it
Yeah.
affects it.
So we'll be working closely with the Community Development Department, and they're the planning experts for the county. And so a lot of that, the beauty of this process is that we're going to be responsive to proposals that we receive from organizations. And so I can't answer some of those questions because I don't know what proposals that we could possibly receive. And so where's the land coming from? Well, it's going to depend on what proposals we get. Sometimes people gift land to organizations. Sometimes it might be county land. Stephen asked if there's any places in the county where that might be happening. That's currently happening on Lopez Island right now. There's a piece of county-owned land that was owned by Public Works that the county council decided it was just a raw piece of land. Public Works wasn't going to do anything with it. And so they said, hey, can we make this available to put affordable housing on it? And so we are coming to the end of our process on that to select a developer to build affordable housing. And so I think with the conclusion of that process, the county is going to continue looking at individual parcels throughout the county, regardless of the outcome of this election. That's something that the county is willing to pursue, looking for unused pieces of land.
So in doing this process, this group didn't speculate, we anticipate, or we would estimate maybe within this first window of 12 years, we'd have X number of apartments we could see that meeting this need. I would imagine you're projecting not only numbers of people and expectations, for example, on all of the islands. And that's what I was wondering, how you anticipate this growth pattern.
Right.
Even though you don't have those bids yet, you
Right.
certainly must have in mind how you anticipate this falling.
Well, so something else to keep in mind is the plan stipulates that any proposal that we receive must be in compliance with the comprehensive plan. That's currently getting
Right.
updated by community development. And that's going to guide a lot of the development that we see as well. And that brings me back to another question that Steve had, which is that there is a buildable land analysis that's being developed by community development. They've done a couple prototypes to the council, and so that's something that's currently in the hopper and is currently being worked on.
When do you expect that to
You might have to ask the community development, maybe by the end of this year, but I don't want to put any rough timelines on them because they have they're busy, very busy department. But a lot, again, those questions come back to, it's going to depend on what projects people are proposing to us. If we receive nothing but stellar rental projects and nobody proposes to us to do home ownership, well, that's what we're going to try to pursue. And so it's hard to make those kinds of projections. That's why we're just projecting that it would be 400 households. And that that may take the shape of people who have affordable house, like take the example of the Harborview apartment complexes, that some of those households may be people that live in affordable housing, were going to lose it, and then didn't because these funds were available to purchase or help purchase something like that. But what the actual breakdown is going to be is kind of anyone's guess.
Thank you.
You had a question here?
It was a quick question for Ryan. I think you mentioned that the county had already accumulated $100,000 for transient rental homes, or in the very first introduction.
So yeah, no, I don't know that. I think that was true.
I think that was my summary of last year's program.
Is there a housing bank now fund? Is there available funds for transient homes?
That was from speakers from the county that attended last year, and I don't know what the status of that was.
So there could be this $100,000 fund somewhere.
I
Could be for
that may be referring
tourism-related housing.
Okay.
And I don't know.
I was just curious about how that was administered and who got.
Yeah, I mean, if there is, I would love to know about it.
One action that would help is to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. Do you guys have any idea how we can do that? No?
I think that might be above their pay grade. Yeah.
Especially for Ryan, because you're talking about the plan that's coming up, but regarding a number that Steve mentioned, I understand there's some long-term monitoring of the affordability of the occupants involved with this investment. But is there going to be a project management facility to make sure that the piggy bank of tax money is not spent on $300, $400 square foot housing, rather Formica and linoleum sort of living? You're making we're creating a huge piggy bank, and is there any, let's say, project management? Is this going to be spent having custom home builders build affordable housing, or is it something else?
So that's a good question, and the plan calls for a sort of balance between building durable homes and building, not luxury homes. And so we want to make sure that people aren't cutting corners and aren't putting in the cheapest things possible so that these homes will actually last for 99 years. But when people submit proposals to the county, it should include detailed information both about what specifically they're going to be spending that money on. Through the project phase, if they are awarded funds, they will be submitting information to the county about I spent X, Y, and Z on X, Y, and Z. And so in that case, we can be very specific about these dollars are being spent on these things, and then we can report to the county and out to the community how those monies are being spent.
And is that possibly going to be in terms of a dollars per square foot thing, or per item?
It's possible that it could be a dollars per square foot thing. I mean,
plan calls for, at the minimum, a yearly report to the county council with sort of as much information and data we could give them as far as cost per square foot, as well as tenant profiles of people that are living in there, how many units have been constructed, how many are projected, that kind of thing.
All right.
If I can elaborate on that a little bit, last week Steve came to our office meeting and we talked about that a little bit, about different forms of housing potentially. And Community Home Trust moved in a bunch of homes that ended up costing more to fix up than what they were anticipating. And then so there's, do you continue on that route or do you look at other potential routes? There's different types of homes that can be, constructed on site, like Armstrong Homes and other different programs. So I think the gist I got from it is that they're going to look at different forms of doing it. But as Ryan was saying, there has to be a good level of quality in the construction so that they will be not only perpetually affordable, but stand perpetually.
Is there any way that this fund could help make another development like the Oaks?
I don't think anything prevents it. I believe the plan specifically allows for mobile homes.
Well, I'll tell you on that one, because Jan Guy's a good friend of mine. And,
I know, it's a nightmare getting it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful project out there. They do a great job running it, and it was well designed in the first place, and they would like to expand, but they haven't been allowed to expand. And as far as I know, there's no other place on the island where you could put one in. But I think, either an expanded Oak should be allowed, or we should be able to put one somewhere else, because it's a great solution.
Yeah.
So I just want to come back to this idea of density. I recall the ADU wars a little differently than you do, in that there was a strong backlash in the community about having increased density, and I'm concerned about this Steve Buck's comment that they're having trouble finding land for these kinds of projects, and I think we all agree that affordable housing often involves higher densities. Is this, we're going to be creating a fund where there really just isn't the land available under current land use law to even, have these kinds of projects? Or are you confident that there are going to be projects that are going to be available because the density rules allow that?
I think there's going to be more projects than we have funds for. I think that there's going to be land donated by people. There's going to be land that exists that we're not currently aware of. I spoke to Erica Shook, the community development manager, about this very issue and her working on the buildable land analysis. And what she told me is that she did not have a concern that a lack of land was going to be our problem.
You had a question here?
Oh, for Steve. Does the program, because this is my first time getting involved in this, so I hope this is a good question. Will the funds have priority for individual homes, I'm sure, but will they consider like buildings that would have ownership with condos or apartments, or what would be the focus of the funds, or primarily single-family homes?
I think that's a better question for Ryan. But my understanding is that almost anything's on the table and almost anything's possible. And hopefully creativity will come into this, because I totally agree that I would love to see what's going on. From my understanding, this is secondhand information at Roche Harbor right now. I mentioned about them using their own land and their own funds to bring in expanded trailer homes. And there's something like $100,000 per in their family units. So the thing is that I'm hoping that within this whole process, and I think I speak for the campaign, that we're going to see creativity. And one of the things that stimulates creativity better than anything else is a pot of money. And it also kind of creates stupid sometimes, but we're not going to let that happen in this place. And I think creativity means tiny houses, small houses, apartments, condos, whatever works and meets the requirements of the county in order for somebody to be able to make a proposal for those funds. But I personally hope that it involves a wide variety of sizes and housing units.
Ryan, did you have anything to add?
Sure,
to
I
that?
just wanted to say that all of those things that you just mentioned are possible to be built, and what you're probably gonna more see is what can the county get the most bang for its buck for? Again, with keeping in mind the quality and like sustainable design features, but if we get proposals for a bunch of condos and we say, wow, we're getting this many units for this amount of money that they're asking for, then that's what we're gonna pursue. If it's a tiny village and it's a great project and we're getting this many units, that's gonna be sort of the name of the game, is how much funding are these projects getting from other sources versus what they're asking of us, and how many units are we getting for that. But we'll consider any of those things.
There's a question back here. Okay, Laura?
There are a number of people who live in the county who are either handicapped to the point that they have to have some care, or else they're developmentally delayed. And many of them do live somewhat on their own, but a lot of them right now are living with their parents who eventually are going to die. I would love to see some type of glorified boarding house, I think, for lack of a better term, but some type of sheltered living, but that would give them independence. Is there anything that you think this could help?
I mean, that's a possibility. It depends on the organization. I think somebody else had mentioned earlier, what we typically call this is sort of housing with services. And there's not a ton of service providers in the county at the moment, but again, if somebody were to propose to us that, you know, we want to have this kind of facility for housing these people with on-site services, that would be, I think, very attractive.
I can tell you on the state level that they are looking at a different model for mental health services. And instead of having large institutions that everybody has to go to, having community facilities.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. I think about some of the things like the Volunteers of America has a group home in Everett that somebody I know from here lives in now, but I don't know what the reaction would be, how we would do it. This is just something where I look at something and think this is what we ought to do, but I don't know who the we's going to be.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, if not, I'd like to thank all of you for attending, and let's give us. Thanks, you guys. Thank you.